Good morning. Today I wanted to talk about the new Netflix series Siege War for Cybertron. This is the first of a three-part series, Chapter 1. So this series is the retelling of the basically the pilot episode from the original 80s cartoon. The tone of the show is very dark and gritty, sort of like the uh, Batman show from the 90s. Took place in Gotham, stark, dour, dire circumstances. This show really caters, I think, more to the grim and edgy sort of fan. I would say it's a little bit hard to figure out who this show is intended for, though. These are our darkest times. We're on our last legs. There is no energon left. We're all gonna die. The ship is going down. We are doomed. And I don't know if that really appeals to young people that much. Although I could be wrong. Maybe I'm just old, and maybe that's just what the young people are into these days. But for myself, I was intrigued by a few of the personalities, and then there were others that were, oh, so. I thought that Megatron, his depiction was very well done. Optimus Prime was so. The issue I had with him was he felt like he was a little bit reckless at times, and like the call to action, he seemed to come a little bit early for him. I think that it could be considered something that should be a problem later on. I think in at this point in the story, perhaps Optimus Prime hasn't really made himself into the leader that he needs to be just quite yet. So perhaps this naivety is still present in his character, and maybe it's something that he loses over time in order to become the determined hero he needs to into the future as he wages his battle with the Decepticons. Bumblebee in this story has a very different role from what he did originally. It might be even different from any other depiction of Bumblebee. He's not quite chosen a side to fall on. He's neither an Autobot nor a Decepticon. He's just a little scavenger who does little jobs from time to time. I found this to be quite interesting. Bumblebee has his reservations for joining either side, and that makes perfect sense. He's kind of a drifter. He's looking out first for himself first and foremost, and he's just kind of a survivalist. I think this makes perfect sense. I think that Bumblebee can be the sort of character that the audience needs to sort of latch on to. He could be the guy that we as the audience look at the story through his eyes and ultimately determine for ourselves which side is the one to choose. So I thought Bumblebee's depiction was handled pretty well, although his character is a little bit overly dour, which sort of goes with the rest of the tone of the series. The personalities of many of the characters that were depicted, I thought were pretty spot on. There was a Starscream, Shockwave, Wheeljack, Alita 1, Chromia. Those characters were all handled very well. I thought that their personalities were very true to their natures as they've been shown in the past. The characters that I thought had strayed way too far off would probably be Jetfire, Ironhide, and there is a new character that is released later on, Sound Blaster, who, well, okay, so I'll talk about Jetfire first. Originally, this character was a friend of Starscream's in the old cartoon. So they were both scientists. They were they had known each other before the war, so they didn't really fight very much in the old TV series. And he was later discovered frozen in a block of ice in the Arctic by Starscream. And Starscream went out of his way to help Jetfire out and thaw him and free him. And that is why Jetfire went and joined up with the Decepticons at first. But once he saw the way that the Decepticons treated each other and their quest for power, Jetfire decided to abandon them and go join the forces of the Autobots. This new Jetfire is not a scientist. He's not Starscream's friend. Instead, he is depicted as the leader of the Seekers, which, okay, I'm fine with that. He's a giant flying guy. Sure, why not? But then he does come into conflict with Starscream quite a bit in this series. And it's not really understood within the episodes of Chapter 1 why he has such a beef with Starscream. It's not really known if they had a history in the past. He just kind of attacks Starscream sort of at random at times. Starscream is following orders, and then Jetfire proceeds to cut off his hand, which would anger anybody. And then later on, when Starscream has his hand repaired and attached again, Jetfire provokes him even further. So this depiction of Jetfire is just kind of strays very far from the Jetfire from the past. I'm not really sure if it works for him. Jetfire, his character arc is that he's a kind and gentle spirit within, and he eventually loses interest in the Decepticon cause because of how ruthless they are. This Jetfire is ruthless in certain aspects, and only decides to turn once he realizes that there's going to be a genocide because of the Decepticons. But he's okay with handling executions. So I don't think that this was the right approach for Jetfire. Now let's talk about Ironhide. I think Ironhide has an issue in this show that seems to be an issue with many of the characters in this series. He's just sort of stuck as a background character. His personality doesn't really pop. He's very different from the gruff and stern Ironhide, the rough and tumble sort from the original series. I think this Ironhide is just more youthful and exuberant, and as such, he tends to blend into the background cast. I think Ironhide fans especially would take issue with this character. I'm not really sure what was the idea behind taking this approach. It doesn't really add anything to the story, so why change up the character is my question. Okay, so as I said, there are many issues with the characters in the show. First of all, there's too many of them. It's really hard to tell an in-depth story if you have so many characters. Again, I'd like to draw a comparison to Beast Wars, which had a relatively small cast. You had 5 Decepticons and 5 Autobots, or excuse me, 5 Predacons, 5 Maximals, and you could tell some really good stories because you could dive into the psychology of these characters, and each one of them had their own motivations, their own personality, and even from episode 1 of that show, you could tell what they were like, what was their cause. Sometimes it takes a few stumbling steps to find your way. So I'm hoping that that's the case. Otherwise, we're in for kind of a rough time. And again, I don't think that it's a problem necessarily with the writing. There's really good aspects of the writing. I happen to enjoy the intrigue that is going on, but it just seems to fall short when it came to, I think it's the voice direction actually, because the voice cast is really awesome. Starscream's got a good voice, Shockwave's got a good voice, so many are spot on, but I think maybe this is a case where the animation had been done first, and then the voice actors were being asked to submit their lines to the animation rather than the voice actors being recorded first, allowing them to sort of play off of each other and have a little bit of candor. And you can tell when an actor is just talking at the screen, and you can tell when someone is talking to you. And many times it just feels like these characters are just talking at the screen, not talking to anybody. It really is off-putting. So I think that the voice actors did a great job, but I think the voice direction is lackluster. And it's not just that's an issue. I think that dialogue in general is very stilted. It's very wooden. It's unnatural. It really needed some polishing up. As an example, what if instead of Bumblebee saying a line such as, "I just want to survive," to being something more like, "I don't want to die"? I understand that one line is more goofier sounding, but it sounds more relatable. And I think that's what really should have been that should have been kind of the key aspect, is if this is a personal story, if this is a more realistic story, then it should have been told in a more relatable way.